I built an AI cold calling system that can handle over 10,000 calls per month automatically without having to hire a single sales rep. I've actually spent the last 6 months building and testing this solution with real businesses, refining the prompts, fixing the automations, stress testing the call volume, and dialing in what actually converts. So if you're wondering, how does the AI make calls? What powers the phone numbers? How do appointments get booked automatically? What happens after the call ends? And could you build something like this for yourself or sell it to clients? I'm going to show you exactly how it works in this video. And if you want the exact system that I'm showing you, so all the templates, prompts, workflows, everything, I've put it all inside of my Skool community. I'll talk more about that at the end. But for now, let's break this thing down. All right, guys. So before we actually hop into, make.com, Vapi, all that, I want to show you a high-level overview of how the system works. So you can see, this is our AI cold calling system, and it does look complicated with all the lines, but I promise you it's not that complicated as we go through it. So you can see over here we have the legend. So there are black arrows, yellow arrows, blue, and red arrows. The black arrows just mean that a tool is being called. So for example, we have this black line here where this dialer is just calling Vapi so that it can actually make the call, right? Yellow is when data is being pulled in. So we have data being pulled in from the CRM, workers, pagination. I'll go over that in a second. And then blue is data being updated. So after something happens, the dispatcher updates pagination, the dialer updates workers, stuff like that. And then red are just errors being sent. So if there's any errors in any of these processes, then the error will be sent to this errors table here. So there are three main components of this setup. So we have the CRM, which houses all of your clients' data. There is the make.com automations. And then there is, Vapi as well. We do also use Google Sheets, but it's not necessary for this actual system. We just use it in order to help tracking with our clients and stuff like that. So we can see exactly what's going on, what calls were made, when they were made, and we can get a detailed breakdown, and we can go over that with our clients as well. So before we actually get into the AI outbound team, so you can see that we have three AI agents here. We're going to start with the data stores. So inside of make.com, they have what are called data stores, which are basically just small tables. You can think of it, you don't even need to use a data store. You could probably also use a Google Sheet, something like that. It's basically just a simple table that can hold some amount of data, right? So we have three data stores. One is workers, second is pagination, and the third one is errors. So for workers, all workers is it holds all of the different available lines, right? When you're making a call, you need a line to be available in order to make that call, right? And with Vapi, the default one is 10. So you can have 10 calls concurrently, which means at the exact same time, you can have 10 calls being made at the same time, right? Whether that's inbound or outbound. So this workers data store, really all it does is just house all of the different workers that we have. And then it says whether it's that specific worker is available or it's busy, right? Next, we have pagination. So pagination is just a fancy word for what page you're on, basically. So when we're pulling data in from the CRM, we don't want to pull duplicate data. So we want to make sure that we're keeping track of where we are in pulling the CRM. So like if you imagine you have a list of 10 people and we're pulling in data from the CRM, we pulled the first person, and now we need to update this pagination table, which basically just means that you pulled in the first name, and then you're telling pagination, hey, we've pulled in the first name. So the next time that we pull something in, we're going to pull in the second name, and then the third, and then so on and so forth, right? All this does is keep track of where you are in pulling data from the CRM. And then the errors is self-explanatory. It just houses every single error that happens. That way you can review it and make sure that you can update that or adjust if need be. So these are our data stores, and then we have the real magic is in our AI outbound team here. So there are 3 AI agents that are actually working in this system. There is the dispatcher. So the dispatcher, all it does is it pulls in data from the CRM, pulls in data from the workers, and pulls in data from the pagination, and then it sends traffic to the dialer, right? So if you imagine it like a 911 caller, right? So there's a bunch of data being sent to, somebody who works in 911 dispatch. They get all the calls, and then once they get a call, they send out a specific person, right? In this example, instead of sending out a specific person, all the dispatcher does is tap the dialer on the shoulder and be like, hey, make this call, right? All the dialer does is go ahead and then make that call. So it takes in the information that is sent to it from the dispatcher, dials it using Vapi, and then after the call ends, it will update some information in the Google Sheets, and then after this Vapi call ends, it will send information post-call to the updater agent, and then the updater agent updates our Google Sheet, and it's also at the end of it can send emails to your business owners so that they know exactly which leads are interested or not interested in their product. That's how we have it set up right now, because we've been running this with real estate agents. So for their specific niche, we have to update our agents on exactly the real estate agents on which leads are interested in moving forward in the home buying process or home selling process or not, right? So all of the interested parties get emailed from the updater to the business owner's email. So it's pretty simple. Most of this happens in make.com. Again, we do have some other tools that we plug in here, but it's really not that complicated. All right, so now we're going to be breaking down the actual automations inside of make.com. You can see that we have our three here: the dialer, dispatcher, and the updater. So let's dive into the dispatcher first. So it's a pretty simple automation. It's not too crazy. So it starts off by pulling in data from the worker. So I guess this is a good time for me to show you the actual data stores. So we have workers, pagination, and errors, as I said before. With workers, you can see that it just has a worker key. So worker 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The status, whether it's free or busy. It has the last call ID, the last contact ID, and then the last time that it was updated. Now for pagination, all it does is it houses a key. The offset is going to be 0. The limit, so the limit is basically how many people you want to pull per request. So whenever you're requesting data from the client CRM, what all you're doing is pulling 1 instead of 2 or 4 or 10 or however many you want to pull at a time. We're only pulling 1 at a time because it's much more efficient for us, but you can pull as many as you need to. Next is just, this can get a bit technical, but when you pull data from a CRM, it has in the metadata there are I forget exactly what it's called, but there's some sort of like identifier for the next contact that comes after it, right? So if I pull contact 1, it knows what the next contact is. So in the metadata of contact 1 will be the ID for contact 2, so that it knows the order of everything that's happening. So what we would put in next would be the identifier that comes from the metadata of contact 1 for contact 2, right? I hope that made sense. Then next we have just a sort. So I recommend having a standardized sorting mechanism that you're using when you are pulling data from the CRM, because every time that you query the CRM, it's just going to pull data in a random order unless you tell it a specific order to be pulled in, right? So by just having this standard sort, you can tell that, every time that you can guarantee that every time you call the CRM to pull data from it, it is going to be the same list in the exact same order, right? And we just have it the date that it was created at in ascending order. And then this done is just, all it is checks if you are done with the list that you're pulling from, and then update it at the last time that it was updated. And then we have errors. So there shouldn't really be data here. Sometimes there will be if the calls don't go through. Sometimes there can be an issue on Vapi's end, or some other point in the process. So it's very valuable to have this type of information. So the information that we're storing would be a randomly generated key, the worker that made the error, the ID of the contact, so that you know if you need to follow back up with the customer because that call wasn't actually made, the stage that the error happened in, the payload. So the payload, all it is when you send an API call to any tool, the payload is what you put in the body of the API request. So if you're requesting data from the CRM, whatever information that you put in the body of the call, probably whatever that JSON is, then you would just put that in the payload, and then the error message is going to be the error message, and then the created at is just going to be when that was created, right? So now that we've seen our data stores, let's go back to our dispatcher. So all we're doing here is just finding a free worker from our workers table. If one exists, then we are going to get the pagination from our pagination table, so we know exactly who we're going to be pulling next. So at this point, we know that there's a worker available, so we can go ahead and try to make a call. Then we've gotten the ID of the next person that we need to call. At this point, we just make the call to the client's CRM. So because, again, we've been doing this with real estate agents, our client was using Follow Up Boss, which is a CRM that they use. So we have this Follow Up Boss node here, but you can really slot in any CRM. They all function relatively the same way as long as you have API access. So you're just going to be calling the API, getting a contact from the CRM. Once you've done that and a contact actually was returned to you, you're going to just update that pagination so that you know what contact you just pulled, and you can update your pagination table so that you know the next contact that can be pulled. Set your worker as reserved. So the worker that we found here, set that same worker to be reserved so that it can't be called on in the future, or at least while we're in this process. And then here is where we actually call the worker. So this call worker function is just going to be calling our dialer. We're going to go through our dialer in a second. If the call is successful, so we're going to get a response back from calling the worker. If the call is successful, we're going to set the worker as busy. If the call was unsuccessful, we're going to set the worker to be free, and then we're going to send the error to the errors data store. Hope that made sense. Next, let's go through the dialer. So the dialer is super simple. We have our webhook, so all this does is just wait for it to be called from the dispatcher. Then we have our Vapi call, so all this does is just call Vapi. It sends a API request to the Vapi API, and it has all the information of our bot, the assistant that we've made, all of that, and whatever customer information we also need to send so that the bot has context. We send that all here to Vapi. So Vapi goes ahead, makes the call, handles the call. And after that happens, all we do is we add a row in our call log, which is on our Google Sheet. This is an unnecessary step. This is just what we use because this is what we're using for tracking, and we can help, stay aware of what's happening with our clients and the system. And then we update the ID of the last person called from that worker. So we update the worker's data store here. If there's an error, we add the error to the data store. We reset that worker to be free, and then we add this user, whatever this lead was, to the callback list. So we have another list that in case there's an error whenever we try to call them, we add them to a separate list. That way we can call them again in the future. And finally, we have our updater. So with our updater, it looks like a lot is going on, but I promise you it's not that crazy. So if I zoom in, we have this webhook right here. This webhook is just going to be what we use as the server URL in Vapi. So whenever anything happens in Vapi, whether the call is answered, the call was made, the call was declined, the user hung up, the bot hung up, whatever happened, anytime that there's an event, Vapi sends information to the server URL. So that is this webhook right here. So after a call ends, we're going to be pulling the end of call report. You can see that we're filtering based off of the end of call report. Up here, if the call was ended, we update the worker status as free. If the call was answered, we update some information in our Google Sheet. And if it is the end of call report, so if the information that hits this webhook is the end of call report, then we use this information to update our Google Sheet with said information. We update the CRM so that the customers can see exactly, what's happening at the end of these calls. And then here, that's all you really need for this system, to be honest, to have the update. But I found that it's super valuable to have this next kind of chunk over here, which basically just takes the transcript from your call and the summary of your call, and it throws it into AI. AI deciphers basically if your customer was interested, not interested, whether you should delete their information from your CRM, whatever, right? It fully breaks down exactly what happened during that call, and then it categorizes them. So if the user left a voicemail, don't do anything. Oh, if they were unavailable at that time, we want to add them to the callback list. That way we can call them at a better time. If they are not super ready to convert right now, then what we can do is add them to a long-term nurture list. If the customer is uninterested, then we just update the Google Sheet and we don't send this information to the client. And then if they are interested, then we update our Google Sheet and then we send an email to the business owner so that they can handle the rest of the interactions from here. Also, I do want to mention that we also send emails after adding people to the callback list, because there are times where they might request, the lead might request to speak directly to your client. So we'll send that email to our client so that they understand that, hey, we talked to this person, they were busy. They said maybe they requested a call back at 5 p.m. from a person, and we send that email to them so that they're aware and can make that call at 5 p.m. So that's really it for everything that we need to go over in Make. Now let's dive into Vapi. So in Vapi, the most important thing that you're going to need here is just the assistant, right? So this is just a random assistant that I've created. This isn't the one that we're actually using. And you can see that I'm in my organization. I'm not in any of my clients' organizations. This is just a test assistant that we have, but I have tons of videos on the channel about, how to build these Vapi agents, these voice agents. It's not super difficult. It's actually fairly simple, but if you're interested in, learning how to build stuff like this, check up here. I'll link a video that I did where we made a restaurant, a voice AI assistant for a restaurant. Super valuable there. But here we have our assistant, right? We just have our prompt, whatever the first message you want it to be, and then all of our different settings. If you want this assistant to be able to book calls, what you need to do is go to tools and make sure that you have a Google Calendar tool. So the good thing about Vapi is they didn't always have this, but they have it now. And that's one thing that I really like about Vapi, is that I've seen how far it's come as a product. They have these ready-made tools that you can use. So the Google Calendar one is great. So you would just click on create event or check availability, and then you would just enter in your calendar ID and everything like that. You just have to connect everything. It's super simple to set that up. But once you have your tool set up, I'm just going to delete that. Once you have your tool set up, you'll go back to your assistant, and then you're gonna go to tools, and then just make sure that those tools are available for this assistant. That way, this assistant, when it's on the phone with the leads, it can actually book calls if necessary. The only other thing in Vapi that I want you guys to be aware of is phone numbers. So if you go to the phone numbers tab, it's super important that you can see these phone numbers here. They both say Twilio. You can get a free phone number through Vapi. So you can just get a free Vapi number, put in the area code that you want to use, and then it will just generate a free phone number for you. But the problem here is that, one, I believe there's a limit on the amount of calls that you can do in a day. And there's also the spam label that will come up on your phone when you use these phone numbers. They are legitimate numbers, and the spam label is only applied because these phone numbers aren't actually verified with the cell phone companies, the cell phone carriers. So they flag them as spam because they're not generally registered numbers. What you should do is go to Twilio and import a number. So what you would do is go to twilio.com, go to phone numbers, manage, buy a phone number. You can see all the phone numbers that are available to buy. So they're about $1.15 a month, depending on the number. You can also input your area code or a city, and you can get a number in that specific city as well. With this as well, you will potentially have the spam label. All this does is make sure that you don't have any call limits per day, because the free number from Vapi has call limits. What you want to do here is, after you've bought your number, so let's say I've bought, this number. I don't actually have it, but let's say I do. You would go to the free caller registry, and then sign up, and you'll be able to register your number, and the spam label will get removed. It might take a couple of days or even up to a week or 2 weeks to get everything, for that spam label to be completely removed. But for me, I've only seen a week or less, and that number has been gone. That spam label has been removed. So you would just come to this free caller registry and get your phone number registered with the cell phone carrier so that you can actually remove that spam label. So after you've bought your number from Twilio and you have registered it with the free caller registry, what you want to do is actually import it into Vapi so that you can use it with your agent. And then in order to do that, just enter in the phone number, enter in your Twilio account SID. So you'll find that in Twilio. If I go back to the account dashboard, you can see your account SID here, and then your auth token. Copy both of those, enter that in here, and then you can give it a label if you want, and then just click on import, and everything will get set up. So this is the number label that I gave this specific number. And then here is where you will enter in the server URL. So remember when I said from the updater automation in make.com, the webhook URL, you want to take that and enter that in right here. And then if you scroll down, you have inbound settings and outbound settings. So you can select if you can use the same number differently for inbound versus outbound. So you can have two different assistants operating from this same phone number, whether somebody calls inbound or you are calling outbound. So for inbound calling, you can have a certain assistant on this specific phone number. And on the outbound settings, you can have a different assistant on that specific phone number. That's not 100% necessary to set up here, because inside of the make automations, when you're actually calling Vapi, inside of that API request, I do specify the number that I want to use and the assistant that I want to use. But it could be super valuable for you to do that here, and you wouldn't actually need to input that into your API call from make.com. I recommend doing it the other way, the way that I have it set up, but it's completely up to you guys there. That wraps up the AI cold calling system, the entire breakdown. Steal this system. I really want you guys to have it. In order for you guys to get it, go to the description box below or the pinned comment and join my Skool community. It'll be completely available there for everybody in my community. You'll have access to the templates, the prompts, the image, everything. And you'll also have access to me. You can reach out to me anytime and ask any questions. I'd be happy to help. All right, that's it. See you guys in the next one.